All right, let's do this. Welcome, everyone. Ready to take a deep dive into John Carpenter's Escape from New York. This movie is a total trip, a dystopian world that still feels relevant even decades later. I mean, it's got action, it's got symbolism, it's got social commentary. Where do we even begin?
You hit the nail on the head. It really has it all. It's not just about the thrills, though. It's that Escape from New York makes you think, too. It throws us into this crazy vision of 1997 Manhattan turned into a giant prison island. It's like Carpenter took all the anxieties of the time and just amplified them on screen.
Yeah, that setting is so striking. The minute you see Manhattan surrounded by those giant walls, you know this isn't going to be your typical action flick.
Right. It's a visual metaphor, this idea of a walled city that we've seen in other films like The Warriors or even Mad Max. It taps into our primal fear of being trapped, of society collapsing around us. And it's not just about physical walls either.
I see what you mean. It's like this feeling of being boxed in, whether it's by actual walls or by the rules of a broken system. Speaking of feeling trapped, we got to talk about Snake Plissken.
Oh yeah, gotta love Snake. Kurt Russell just nails the gruff, cynical, anti-hero vibe. He's this ex-soldier thrown into an impossible mission, and he just navigates this world with a coolness that's both captivating and a little bit terrifying.
Totally. He's not your typical hero, that's for sure.
Yeah.
He distrusts authority. He's got this cynical view of the world. He basically does what he wants. But there's still something about him that makes you root for him.
Absolutely. Yeah. He's the classic lone wolf archetype, you know?
Mm.
But he does seem to have this own code, even if he's not a good guy in the traditional sense. He's a product of this brutal world, and it shows.
It's like he's a reflection of this dystopia, a dark mirror, showing us what happens when society breaks down. You wonder if anyone can stay truly good in a system that's so messed up.
Exactly. It makes you question how much of our own morality is shaped by the world around us. Speaking of which, we have to talk about Carpenter's visual style in this film. It's so dark, so shadowy. It really emphasizes the decay and claustrophobia of the prison city.
Oh, for sure. The visuals are just as important as the story here. It's not just about looking cool. It's about creating this feeling of unease, of isolation. Like every shot feels deliberate, like it's adding to the overall mood of the film.
You got it. It's that combination of Carpenter's minimalist direction and Dean Cundey's cinematography. Those decaying buildings, the wide-angle shots that make the characters look so small, the way light and shadow are used. It all contributes to that sense of unease.
It's like the city itself is a character, looming over everything, reflecting how trapped everyone feels.
Exactly. And that's something you see in other dystopian films too, like Blade Runner. That sprawling, overcrowded city just amplifies the feelings of alienation and existential dread that the characters are going through.
And then there's the social commentary woven through the film. The way the government acts, the way they use force, the fact that they just threw everyone they didn't like onto this island prison. It's all a bit too close to home. Even today.
That's why Escape from New York is still relevant. It taps into these timeless fears about power, control, and the potential for society to just fall apart. Carpenter isn't trying to give us easy answers, but he makes us think about these uncomfortable truths, you know, about the systems we live in, the choices we make.
We've talked a lot about Snake, the setting, the social commentary, but honestly, what really gets me about Escape from New York is how symbolic it is. I mean, everything is layered. From Snake's name itself,
right?
It means escaped prisoner in Yiddish, to that ticking clock in his neck. It's not just a cool plot device.
Yeah, that clock is a powerful symbol. It represents mortality, this ever-present threat of annihilation. Time's running out, not just for Snake, but for this whole society teetering on the brink of collapse.
It's like it visually represents the pressure we all feel, to make something of our lives before it's too late. And then how Snake disables it. He doesn't try to carefully diffuse it or anything. He just rips it out.
Oh, yeah. That's such a powerful moment. It's like this raw, visceral act of defiance against the forces that are trying to control him. And that theme of rebellion, of refusing to be controlled, it's everywhere in the film.
From the way he interacts with the other prisoners, to the way he challenges the Duke of New York, right to the end when he just tosses away the president's speech.
Oh, man, that ending. It's like a big middle finger to the entire system. What do you think Carpenter's trying to say with that?
It's so open to interpretation, but I think it says something about how power is ultimately pointless. Even if you save the leader of a corrupt system, you haven't really changed anything.
It's bleak, but it makes you think. Maybe real change only comes from individual acts of rebellion, from rejecting the systems that try to oppress us.
Wow, I feel like we've only scratched the surface here.
Yeah.
And we haven't even gotten to the surreal element yet. All the bizarre characters, the dreamlike sequences, the way Carpenter plays with absurdity.
That's where things get even more interesting. We'll explore how those surreal elements add to the dystopian atmosphere, the existential themes, and how he plays with the idea of reality itself.
This is going to be good.
All right, so we're back, diving deeper into Escape from New York. We were just talking about how symbolic this film is, and how even the smallest details, like Snake's name or that ticking clock, have these layers of meaning. Let's shift gears a little and explore how Carpenter uses surrealism to really amp up those dystopian themes.
Yeah, the whole film has this unsettling, almost dreamlike quality to it. I mean, take that scene where Snake stumbles upon that underground community living beneath the prison.
Oh, absolutely. They're like ghosts clinging to the past, a past that's been completely erased.
Like they're frozen in time, stuck because they can't let go of what's gone.
Right. It's like Carpenter is saying, hey, this is what happens when a society breaks down. You lose your history, you lose your sense of community. You basically retreat into this collective amnesia. And the fact that they're literally buried beneath this dystopian present, that's a powerful image.
It really shows how easily history can be forgotten or just suppressed.
Exactly. And then you have the Duke of New York, this larger-than-life character, holding court in a decaying theater. It's like he's trying to rebuild some twisted version of the world that existed before the prison.
Surrounded by his eccentric followers.
Yeah. It's fascinating. He shows how much humans crave power. Even in the most hopeless situations, he's built this fantasy world for himself, clinging to these scraps of power while everything around him falls apart.
And he even has his own court, right? Enforcing his own brand of justice with those gladiator games.
Oh, yeah. That scene in the arena is so important. It's not just about violence. It's about how, in a society that's become totally desensitized, violence becomes just another form of entertainment.
Like a reflection of how we consume violence through the media, you know?
Okay.
We see so much of it, we become numb to the real cost.
Exactly. And the fact that even the president ends up in that arena, it shows how power can corrupt anyone, even those at the top.
It's pretty bleak. But there's also this dark humor throughout Escape from New York that keeps things from getting too heavy.
Oh, for sure. Carpenter uses irony in that black comedy perfectly. Like when Snake finally finds the president and he's playing chess with the Duke.
Right. It's such a bizarre moment. You'd expect him to be terrified or held hostage, but instead he's found this weird sense of peace in this chaotic world.
It's like Carpenter is playing with our expectations, showing us how adaptable humans can be. Even in the worst situations, we find ways to cope, to find those little bits of normalcy.
Speaking of unexpected, the color palette in this film is so striking. So much red, especially around Snake.
Oh, yeah. The colors are totally deliberate. Red often symbolizes danger, rebellion, blood. It makes sense for Snake, you know, this anti-establishment figure who's constantly fighting the system.
Then you have the blue, usually associated with the president and those in authority.
Exactly. It represents control, order. It's like those colors are visually representing this clash between individual freedom and societal control.
And it's not just the colors themselves, it's how Carpenter uses them. The darkness represents the unknown, the danger that's always lurking. And then you have these moments where light suddenly illuminates a character or a scene, making everything feel so fragile.
And the way the lighting shifts suddenly sometimes, it creates this disorienting effect that really mirrors the character's confusion and uncertainty.
Like the film itself is reflecting their psychological state. It's
Right.
brilliant. All this talk about dystopian themes, the visuals, the characters, it makes me think of other films.
Oh, totally. Like what?
Well, Brazil, for sure.
Yeah.
It has that bureaucratic nightmare, that dark satirical humor. And of course, there's Blade Runner, which also uses visuals to build this incredible world. But it's both beautiful and scary at the same time.
Oh, great choices. I would also add Children of Men to that list. It really explores themes of hope and despair in a world that's on the verge of collapse. It's fascinating how all these films use these dystopian settings to tap into the anxieties of their time, but they also hit on something deeper, something about being human.
It's like they're forcing us to confront those uncomfortable truths about ourselves, of the world we've built. But they also remind us that even in darkness, there's still this spark of hope, you know, this drive to survive, to resist.
And that's what Escape from New York does so well. It doesn't shy away from the bleak stuff, but it also reminds us that we have the power to choose, to fight back, to find meaning, even in the darkest times. But we haven't really talked about that ending. You know, the one that everyone's still debating.
Oh man, that ending is a total mind bender. and it's the perfect place to pick up when we come back. We'll dive into that last act of defiance, unpack its multiple meanings, and maybe, just maybe, we'll figure out what Carpenter was trying to say about power, rebellion, and finding meaning in a world that seems pretty hopeless. Okay, so we're back, and we're ready to tackle that ending in Escape from New York. Seriously, still thinking about it.
It's definitely a head-scratcher. After everything Snake goes through, all the risk he takes to rescue the president, he just tosses away the tape with the president's speech. Like, it means nothing.
It's such a bold move. I mean, he could have just played along, gone back to being a hero. But instead, he chooses to undermine the whole mission. What's your take on it?
It's like Carpenter is throwing out these questions, right? About power, about the systems we build, even about what it means to be a hero. Is Snake a hero for saving the president? Or is he a villain for potentially causing even more chaos? It's up to us to decide.
It's what makes this film so different. It doesn't give you easy answers. It leaves you with this feeling, this unease, long after it's over.
There's that existentialism too, you know? Like Snake rejects the meaning that everyone else is trying to put on him, on the situation. He's choosing to define his own purpose, even if the world around him seems completely meaningless.
It's like he's saying, screw your rules, I'll make my own meaning.
Exactly. And it makes you think, especially today when we're constantly told what to think, what to believe. Snake's actions, even if you don't agree with them, they're a reminder that we still have the power to choose, to question authority, to find our own path.
Even when the world feels like it's falling apart around us. And that's what makes Snake Plissken such a compelling character. He embodies that rebellious spirit.
Totally. He's the ultimate outsider, this anti-hero who doesn't play by the rules. He's flawed, yeah, he makes reckless choices, but you can't help but admire that drive, that need for freedom. And you can't talk about Escape from New York without mentioning how visually stunning it is.
Oh, yeah. Carpenter's style, the way he uses those minimalist shots, the darkness, it's so effective.
And Cundy's cinematography, the framing, the way they use light and shadow. They created this world that feels both futuristic and gritty, and it still holds up all these years later.
And that score, it's like Carpenter created this whole sonic landscape that just adds to the tension and the overall feeling of dread.
Carpenter's music is always spot on, but in Escape from New York, it's on another level. It just perfectly complements the visuals, the themes, everything. It's such a unique film. I mean, it came out over 40 years ago, but it still feels so relevant today.
Doesn't it? It's like it captured these anxieties from the 80s, but it also speaks to these deeper fears about human nature, about what could happen if we let things go too far.
Right. It's about freedom versus control, about searching for meaning in a world that seems to have lost its way. And it still resonates because it asks these really tough questions, you know? It makes you think about the world around you, the choices you make.
So for someone who's maybe on the fence about watching a film from the early 80s, what would you say to convince them to check out Escape from New York?
I'd say don't let the year it came out fool you. This movie is a classic. It's one of those films that just grabs you and doesn't let go. It's a wild, crazy, thought-provoking ride. And hey, maybe it'll even inspire you to embrace your own inner rebel a little.
That's a great way to put it. If you ever feel trapped or like the world's closing in on you, remember Snake Plissken. Remember his grit, his refusal to give up, his need to forge his own path. You might just find a little bit of that Snake Plissken spirit in yourself. And on that note, it's time for us to escape from this deep dive.
But remember, keep exploring, keep asking questions, and we'll see you on the next deep dive.